Hello friends, when skeletons talk, scientists listen. How someone died centuries ago can reveal more about the social violence and beliefs of past eras. In this video, we will show you about 10 old murders, some of which are mysterious and have no explanation. 10. Man killed on sand dunes. In 2005, a construction crew found human bones in Sydney. The skeleton is located in the suburb of Narrabeen, and belongs to an Aboriginal man in his 30s. He turned out to be Australia's first spear victim. Scholars from all fields have come together to reconstruct his life and death. Chemical analysis showed that the young man lived on a diet consisting of seafood, shorebirds and seaweed. About 4,000 years ago, he found himself on a beach. He was likely surrounded by several assassins, stabbed to death and possibly left on top of a sand dune. During excavation, a number of spear points were found. This was important to add some context to the killing. Ancient records mention how Europeans witnessed a punishment ritual in the Sydney area during which a person was killed with barbed spears. Indeed, 17 pieces of barbs were found stuck in or scattered around Narrabeen's skeleton. Many of the points also contain remains of human bone and limb damage consistent with spearing a human. What the man did to deserve this remains a mystery. 9. The true story of a Freemason. The so-called Masonic man fled the city of Pompeii when Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, but failed to escape and died along with thousands of other residents. When the man's remains were found in 2018, the internet had a field day. The scene begged belief. The skeleton was lying face down, its head trapped under a huge piece of masonry. At first, the cause of death was clear. He was running for his life when he was hit by a 300 kilogram, 661 pounds, flying rock. This crushing end made the man a unique victim in Pompeii. About a month after the discovery, archaeologists removed the stone. They fully expected to find a crushed skull. After all, the evidence suggests that the man's upper body, including his chest and head, was pulled down by the mass's velocity. Remarkably, the head was not injured. Not a single fracture was found. The lower corner appears to have been caused by tunneling in the 19th century, which caused the area around the rock to collapse slightly. The man was likely killed by the lava flow before the rock arrived. Volcanoes unleash this terrifying death in the form of a scorching cloud that no one can outrun. While we now know that the man was not crushed to death, it remains unclear why the construction did not cause more damage. 8. A rosemary could have been royalty. A few years ago, a so-called rosemary man was found in a Scottish cave. He belonged to a mysterious group called the Picts and was killed about 1,400 years ago. The facial reconstruction showed a handsome, serious-looking man. The rosemarky man was also burly, which was probably why his killers shot him down in a group and without finesse. The first 3 blows broke his teeth and broke the back of his head and jaw. The 4th blow was so brutal that it passed through the skull on one side and came out the other. A 5th strike was added for good measure. The 30-year-old was buried in the cave where previous excavations found signs of Eid. People were either genuinely happy the man was dead or his situation required a big show. A 2019 study gave the case theory more prominence. Although he was young, the man did not appear to have any injuries other than those that caused his death. There was no indication that he was a warrior or had done any work. In addition, tests revealed that he was on an unusual high-protein diet, as if he had eaten nothing but pork. There were no signs that he had been living a difficult life, eating very well and receiving a careful burial, all of which indicate that the man was an elite member of the royal family, or that he was a tribal leader. 7. The child in the bathrooms building. In 2018, archaeologists entered Pompeii with scanning equipment. The city's central bath complex had been considered completely excavated since the 19th century, but the team decided to survey the structures anyway. There was a flash on the screen that turned out to be the remains of a child. This remarkable discovery likely eluded previous searches because the skeleton was hidden under a layer of soil. No one knows why he was alone that day, where the family or guardians were, or exactly what killed the child. However, it seemed that the young man was extremely afraid. In an attempt to hide from the falling debris and ash, the approximately 7-year-old boy rushed into the bathroom complex. The decision will be fatal. Although nothing is certain, researchers believe the child may have died when Vesuvius unleashed deadly lava flows. As the burning ash rose above the building, the flow could have entered the windows and caused the child to suffocate. 6. Evidence about the collapse of the Southern Maya. In 2019, the tomb of a Maya warrior was discovered in Belize. The cemetery is located in the Mayan city of Pacbatan and contains 2 memorial skulls. Both were made and decorated to be worn as necklaces. While one bore a glyph believed to be the first known word for trophy skull, the pair had greater significance. They can add valuable information to the greatest secrets of the Maya. The heyday of the culture was the Classic period. Their society, political system, architecture, and military flourished for hundreds of years. Then, for some reason, everything was resolved. Over the course of 150 years, starting in the 8th century, the once powerful culture has fallen into deadly disarray and no one knows why. Researchers searched for a single cause until it became clear that no single factor was responsible. Instead, a complex mix of drought, violence, overpopulation, and weak authority played its part. At the very least, the Pacbatan memorial skulls, along with a handful of others, suggested a reason for the war's destabilization in cities to the south, including Belize. Previous evidence showed that their leaders and relics had been deliberately destroyed by someone. Regardless of where the trophy skulls were found, most necklaces were owned by northerners and were made by southerners. It appears that the Mayas of the north, sensing the decline of the ruling dynasties in the south, moved in to kill. 5. Distortions in Cambridgeshire. In 2018, archaeologists discovered a rubbish dump in Cambridgeshire. The gravel pit dates back to the late Roman or early Saxon period. Nearby there was a Roman well. Both were surrounded by a circular moat containing some sort of settlement. The investigation brought together a tragic community. Once, they lived their lives. Then the Romans arrived, stormed the moat, and enslaved the villagers. There were signs of intensification of agriculture after that, perhaps to feed the Romans, who forced local people to tend the fields. When excavations found human remains, they showed what likely happened when people tried to resist. The skeletons of 2 men were discovered inside the garbage pit. Their legs were cut off at the knees, hopefully after death, and placed next to their shoulders. One theory is enough to make anyone shudder. Archaeologists believe that the mutilation may have occurred to prevent men from emerging from their graves. This brutal act could also have served as a warning to others not to flee. The skeletons looked tame compared to a third man found in the well. The body was missing everything from the waist down. It was cut in half and thrown away like trash. 4. Professional murder in the Middle Ages. During the 11th century, a man was violently stabbed to death. Archaeologists recovered his body in 2019 during excavations in Sicily. At first, the crime went unnoticed. What caught the team's interest was the man's unusual stance. It was upside down, something not usually seen in medieval Sicily. In fact, this was the first discovery of its kind in the region. The grave was also shallow and devoid of goods. These do indicate that someone didn't like the 30 to 40-year-old, but the wounds decided it. After scanning the skeleton, a rough version of his final moments emerged. The man was kneeling when he was stabbed at least 6 times from behind. Whoever attacked him was most likely a professional killer, as he took a quick and certain death. The heart has been pierced several times. Perfect stab wounds also indicate that the victim cannot resist. In fact, his feet were found close together as if tied with a long rope. The researchers believed that the execution-style killing and disrespectful burial indicated that the man may have been an outlaw. However, nothing is known about that day. The victim could be an ordinary man who earned the hatred of someone who settled scores with hired killers. 3. The true brutality of medieval tournaments. In 1997, about a dozen skeletons were removed from Stirling Castle. One of them was an English knight who died during a tournament in 1388. The deaths during jousting and other war games may seem accidental. However, a recent review of the knight's remains proved otherwise. The man's name was Robert Morley, a muscular figure in his mid-20s. Numerous physical features and injuries indicate that Morley lived a difficult life that included brutal tournaments. During the previous competitions, he survived an arrow in the chest. One time an axe made a hole in his skull. He survived that too. A fall from his horse or another blow also cost Morley some teeth. The powerful knight was finally killed and a rival plunged a sword into his face, slitting his nose and jaw. It appears that honor was not included in the tournament rules. Morley was fatally struck as he lay on the ground. 2. Brutal Portuguese punishment. In 2001, researchers removed nearly 100 bodies from a cemetery in Portugal. The medieval burials are located in Estremas and, with the exception of 3, were normal. The graves of the trio were at the southern end of the cemetery. Archaeologists were horrified to discover that the men's hands and feet had been amputated. The severed parts were hidden under or next to their bodies. Worse still, there was every reason to believe that the removals were carried out as punishment while the men were still alive. The angle of the cut showed that the legs and arms were held together as each group was cut with an axe or sword. One of the men had a failed attempt to cut off his legs. There were no other injuries on the bodies. This suggests that after the amputations, they were allowed to bleed to death. The reason behind this brutality will never be known. But sometime between the 13th and 15th centuries, the 3 individuals, between the ages of 18 and 35, developed a hatred for someone. Since medieval law removed hands that stole or supported forgery, it is plausible that the men were criminals. If so, the additional axe to their feet indicates that a very serious crime has occurred. 1. A new report on the greatest sacrifice of children. In 2019, a new report revealed the scope of the terrifying event that occurred in Peru. The media has already published stories about the site, which was first discovered in 2011. Many children and baby camels, llamas or alpacas, were killed in what became the largest child sacrifice ever discovered in the New World. The Huanchaquito Las Llamas site belongs to Chimu culture and was a human slaughterhouse in the 15th century. The nondescript place remained hidden for centuries until passers-by noticed human and animal bones clinging to the sand dunes. The first excavations found 43 children and 74 camels. Years later, the body count rose to 3 adults, 137 children, and 200 camels. Based on incomplete skeletons scattered around the site, the death toll may be much higher. The mass grave so far covers an area of 700 square meters, more than 7,500 square feet. One of the worst things that has come to light is the possibility of removing children's hearts. Some of them had wound marks on their chests and their rib cages had been dismantled. Archaeologists had never seen anything like this before. There was no prior warning that ancient Peru was carrying out mass killings of camel children. But it is known that the sacrifices took place as one event. For some reason, children between the ages of 5 and 14 were killed, and their bodies were turned facing the sea. The animals faced the mountains. One theory suggests that the weather caused the killing frenzy. The area was usually barren, but the skeletons were filled with a lot of mud. The rainy season may have become so destructive that people made sacrifices to appease any gods they believed to be angry. At the end of the video, do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell to receive the most important new video.